Why is it that some people are more successful than others? Why is it that some people earn more money, they have better jobs, they get promoted more rapidly, they live longer, they have better health, they have happier relationships, and yet the great mass of men and women, by their own admission, live lives of quiet desperation? Now, no matter what field you're in, no matter what field of endeavor, no matter what work, no matter what activity, there is one thing that all successful people have in common, is that they are good time managers. And the reason they are good time managers is because they recognize that time management is life management. It is personal management. I have never seen an example in the hundreds, thousands of biographies and autobiographies I've studied of successful men and women where the individual has not been well organized and efficient and valued and used their times well. Successful people, winners, use their time well. Losers do not. The question is, how badly do you want to learn how to manage your time well? How much effort are you willing to put into it? Because the key to time management is self-discipline. Probably the best way to put it is this, is time management is self-discipline in action, and self-discipline is the key to success. The first idea, the most important of all, the core of time management, the axle around which the wheel of life turns, is goals. What are your goals? What is it that you want to be or to have or to do? What is it that you want to accomplish in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? The top 3% in every field have goals. The balance of the population have either very vague goals or no goals at all. So the question you have to ask yourself is, who am I? Where am I going? What do I want to accomplish? And there are three major areas of goals that you have to think about. The first is your personal and your family goals. These are the reasons why you're alive. What do you want to accomplish for yourself and for your family? Write them down. Define them clearly. The second set of goals that you have to ask is your business, your career, your financial, your material goals. What is it that you want to accomplish in the external world? Where do you want to make your contribution? The third type of goals you have to ask about are your self-development goals. And in my estimation, your ability and your willingness and your tenaciousness in developing yourself is the key to accomplishing everything else. So here's three questions that you can ask. The first question is, what would you do? What would you set as a goal for yourself? What would you want to be or have if you just won $1 million in the lottery? What would you do if you just won $1 million? If you had all the time and money, you're completely free to decide to do anything you wanted. If you won $1 million, what would you do differently? Think about that. Hold that in your mind. The second question is, what would you do if you just learned today that you only had 6 months to live? What if you only had 6 months to live? What would you stop doing? What would you do more of? Who would you spend time with? Now, the answer to that question is very interesting because what it tells you is what you really value. What is really important to you? And what we have found is that self-esteem, satisfaction, happiness in life comes from getting your goals and your activities congruent with your values, with your priorities, with what you consider to be really important. Now, here's the third question. The third question is, what one great thing would you dare to dream if you knew you could not fail? If you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that you could not fail, what one thing would you set as a goal for yourself? Because sometimes answering that question will tell you the one thing that you've been put on this earth to accomplish. One final point with regard to goals is that goals must be in writing. You must write them down, you must rewrite them, you must define them, you must redefine them. The top 1% of successful people in every area have very clear, specific, written goals. And most of them carry their goals around with them. So let's go from goals as the core of success to point number 2, which is organized plans of action. In an interesting study, or a variety of studies that have been done, they've come to the conclusion that organized plans of action are the key to all success. In fact, action without planning is the cause of every failure. Action without planning is the cause of underachievement. Action without planning is the cause of frustration, time wastage, anxiety, stress, and lack of success in life. So organized plans of action are critical. Now, what is an organized plan of action? An organized plan of action is where you take your goal, you take your objective, and you write out every single step that you're going to have to follow in order to accomplish that objective. You write it out and you list all those plans of action, all of those different activities, and you organize them together into a plan that you can then implement on a day-to-day basis. You decide which has to be done first and which has to be done last, which is more important, which is less important. In fact, the ability to set goals and to create plans for their accomplishment is the master skill of success. If all you learned in life, all you learned in school was the ability to be a continuous goal setter and a continuous planner, day and night, planning, organizing, planning, writing, thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, you'll accomplish more in a year or 2 years than most people accomplish in 10 years or an entire lifetime. It has nothing whatever to do, by the way, with your intelligence. It hasn't anything to do with your education. You know, half of the best educated people in the country are working for people who didn't finish high school or didn't finish college. I wrote an article for a major publication not long ago which said that if you do not have clear goals for your life, you are condemned forever to work for those who do. You see, in life it's very simple. Either you are working toward the accomplishment of your goals or you're working toward the accomplishment of other people's goals. Very important. Now, the third point in excellent time management is analysis. Make a list. In fact, it's been discovered that if you make a list before you begin any task or job, you will immediately improve your productivity by 25%. How do you make a list? Well, you make your list for the week, the Sunday or the Saturday before, and you make your list for each day the evening before, and you always work from a list. Now, why do you make it the evening before? The primary reason is if you make a list the evening before, the subconscious goes to work on your list while you're asleep. And during the night, the subconscious will solve problems and bring insights to you. You'll wake up in the morning with insights, ideas, intuitions, answers that will make your day more productive. Now, the second reason that you use a list is because if you don't have a list, it's like driving down the street in a car with no steering wheel. You just drift, and every bump, every interruption, everything that happens sets you off in a different direction. A list gives you a track to run on for the entire day. Another reason that you use a list is because with a list, you can analyze where you are. You can tell what is more important and what is less important. You can tell what is irrelevant, what can be delegated, what can be delayed, what can be put off. The most important reason for using a list, though, however, is this, is that when you use a list and you work down the list and you check things off, each time you check something off on a list, it gives you a feeling of accomplishment. It's been well said that happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. That happiness is the step-by-step accomplishment of the tasks necessary to accomplish a worthy ideal. And a successful life is based on a series of successful days, and a series of successful days is based on working on a list, one step at a time. Okay, now the fourth principle for effective time management is to set priorities. It's interesting, there are many people who have goals, vague or clear. There are many people who do make plans, but the biggest single problem in human life is setting priorities, determining what is relevant and what is irrelevant. And in setting priorities, an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto in 1895 came up with a principle which is called the Pareto principle. We call it the 80-20 rule. It says that 80% of the value of what you do will be contained in 20% of the things that you do. What does this mean? It means if you make a list of 10 things that you have to do today, you will find that 2 of those things are worth all of the others put together. Now, the difference between highly effective people, as Vilfredo Pareto said, was that highly effective people work on the vital few versus the trivial many. The difference between the two is that ineffective people work on the trivial many. They work on things that are fun. They work on things that are easy. They work on little tasks, fun tasks, irrelevant tasks, but they keep putting off and delaying working on their major tasks. So the key to success is always be asking this question: what is the most valuable use of my time right now? What is the most valuable use of your time right now? I'm convinced that if all you did was organize your life and only work on the most valuable use of your time, that alone would be enough to make you an effective, efficient person. That alone would be enough to increase your productivity, your performance, your profitability, your rewards by 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50%. So always before you begin, ask yourself, is this the most important thing I could be doing? Is this my top priority task? Does this give me the highest payoff? Is this the most valuable use of my time? Now, here is one simple test with regard to value. Ask yourself, in approaching any task, is what impact will the accomplishment of this task have on my future? The futurity of decisions is the key to measuring the value. Most people spend as much as 80% of their time dealing with the problems and difficulties of the past, and only 20% dealing with the opportunities of the future. But successful people are always saying, what impact will this have on the future? Important tasks will always have an impact on the future. Unimportant tasks will only have an impact on the present and maybe even the past. So I say, what is the most valuable use of my time right now, and what impact will this have on tomorrow, the next day, and the future? It's one of the key ways to keep on track with regard to priorities. The fifth key idea in time management, which I am a fanatic on, is concentration. Concentration, concentration. Many people come to me in my seminars and they say, well, I never learned how to concentrate. I can't concentrate. How do I learn to concentrate? Learning how to concentrate is absolutely essential to success. As a matter of fact, it is impossible for you to accomplish anything worthwhile in life without the ability to concentrate single-mindedly on one thing at a time and stay with it until it's complete. In fact, time and motion studies have shown that if you start a task and you put it down and you come back to it and pick it up and start it and put it down and come back to it and pick it up, that it will take you as much as 500% of the necessary time to do a task than if you picked it up and carried it through. Alec McKenzie, great time management expert. Alec McKenzie calls this single handling. Once you have made a list of what you have to do, organized your goals, determined the highest and most valuable priority, then pick the most important thing and begin working on it and stay with it until it's finished. Now people say, well, if I stay with this task until it's finished, I won't get anything else done. That doesn't matter. If it's the most valuable thing that you have to do, it's the most important thing that you could be working on. Now it's a wonderful thing. When you concentrate and work intensely on an important task, it gives you a feeling of energy and enthusiasm. When you complete an important task, your self-esteem goes up. You feel like a winner. You feel great about yourself. But if you work away on low priority tasks, even if you complete them and do them well, you don't get any bang for the buck. You don't get any excitement or thrill from doing something that's not important. As a matter of fact, most stress, anxiety, frustration in the world of work today comes from working very hard on irrelevant tasks. Benjamin Trigo said, if it's not worth doing, it's not worth doing right. And I think it was Drucker who said, the very worst thing in the world is to do very well what need not be done at all. So concentrate single-mindedly on one task at a time. Do first things first, and do things one at a time. Now here's a very simple system that you can use for the first 5 points that we've talked about: goals, plans, priorities, analysis, concentration. It is the ABCDE method. A is the things that you must do, top priority. B is the things that you should do, second priority. C is the things that would be nice to do if you've got all your A's and B's done. D stands for delegate, E stands for eliminate. So when you make a list, the first thing you do is you ABC all your list. A, what you must do, B, what you should do, C, what would be nice to do, and then delegate and eliminate the others. With goals, what you do is this: you make a list of all the things you'd like to accomplish in the next 1 to 5 years. And then you go down the list and write ABC. What you'd love to do, what you'd like to do, what's not that important. Then you take your A goals and you make A1, A2, A3. In other words, your most important, second most important, third most important. Then you take those A goals, you transfer them to another sheet, and you make a list of all the things you're going to have to do to accomplish your goals. Then you ABC the list, and you say, what are the things you have to do, what are the things I should do, what are the things that would be nice to do to accomplish my goals, and then you put those into the goal list, and then you structure and schedule what you're going to do and implement. This is called the 6-step method. Choose your goals, set priorities. Choose your activities, set priorities, schedule, and implement. If you just do that on a day-to-day basis, that alone can make you a great success in life. The 6th key to time management is deadlines. Deadlines and rewards. Now, psychologists have discovered that 85% of the reason that you or I do anything is because of what we expect to happen as a result. We call this consequences or logical consequences. 15% is because of what we've been told, but 85% is the consequences that we expect. So therefore, what you do is when you have an important task, the way that you motivate yourself to do the task is you structure a specific reward that you're going to get when it's finished. Let me give you an example. Sometimes people are very uneasy about making telephone calls, especially salespeople, so they put it off and they procrastinate. What we encourage them to do is give themselves a reward every time they make a phone call. Put a cup of coffee next to the phone. Every time you make a phone call, give yourself a sip of coffee. Take a cookie and break it up. Give yourself a piece of cookie. In other words, train yourself the way you train a dog to have a positive consequence for everything that you do. So set deadlines. How do you set deadlines? First of all, when you set the goal, when you specify the task, set the deadline when it's going to be accomplished. Always set the deadline with lots of room to spare, and always try to finish before the deadline. Tell other people that you're going to finish by this deadline. Promise others that you'll have your work done. It's a powerful way to act as what is called a forcing system. A forcing system is something that motivates you to stay at it. Because if you don't set a deadline and give yourself a forcing system, you fall into the trap of what is called Parkinson's law. Now, Parkinson's law says that work expands to fill the time allotted for it. That if you have 2 hours of work to do and 8 hours of time, you will stretch that work over 8 hours. Parkinson's law also says that work contracts to fill the time allotted for it. If you have 8 hours of work to do, and because of an emergency you have to have it done in 2 hours, you will get it done in 2 hours. Highly effective people are always setting tight, stringent, disciplined deadlines on themselves so they get more work done in a short period of time rather than less work done in a long period of time. Does this make sense? Very, very important. The next principle, number 7, is what is called the time log, which is writing down and keeping track of where your time is going. All effective people know where their time goes. Now let me tell you an interesting principle with regard to time management. It is this, is the more important you are, the more successful you are, the more you tend to measure out your time in minutes. The less successful you are, the more you tend to measure out your time in hours, days, and weeks. The average person thinks of terms of morning or afternoon. The above average person thinks of hours. The successful person thinks of half hours. The very successful person thinks in terms of minutes. They allocate their time carefully. Now the only way that you can do that is what? Is you've got to keep track of what you're spending your time on. 60, 70, 80% of people are not aware of how they spend their time. They think they spend a lot of time in meetings. It turns out they spend a lot of time socializing. They think they spend a lot of time working on reports. It turns out they spend a lot of time on the telephone. They think they spend a lot of time doing important jobs. It turns out they spend a lot of time wasting time. So keep a time log or just keep a sheet, and whenever you have a chance to look at your watch, write down what you're doing at the time, or have somebody else watch what you're doing and feed back to you how you're spending your time. And then you have to ask, is how I'm spending my time consistent with my major goals, my top priorities, my high payoff tasks? And you'll find that it's not. And you'll also find that you feel frustrated and you feel stressed if you are not working your time on the things that you're supposed to do. So keep measuring your time, logging your time, analyzing your time. How am I spending my time? Am I spending my time on the things that are important to me? Am I spending my time on the things that give me a big payoff? And if you're not, keep adjusting and modifying your schedule. A very interesting point with regard to the time log is that self-discipline is critical. You've got to discipline yourself, and you've got to measure and analyze your time every single day, or you slip off it again. The next principle is the principle of procrastination. Overcoming procrastination is absolutely critical, but there's two kinds of procrastination. There's positive procrastination and negative procrastination. Positive procrastination is when you procrastinate on doing low priority tasks. It is when you procrastinate on doing things that do not contribute very much to your major goals. Negative procrastination is when you procrastinate on what is called your most important tasks. Now there's an interesting point, is that their tasks are either urgent, which means they have to be done now, or they are important, which means they don't have to be done now, but they have a very high impact on your future. We have a natural tendency to always do what is urgent rather than what is important. Important tasks are seldom urgent, and urgent tasks are seldom important. So you overcome procrastination with a very, very simple method. It was developed by W. Clement Stone when he was a young man. He built a fortune of $500 million, and this is one of the central principles of his life. It's simply this. Every morning when you get up, say over and over to yourself, do it now, do it now, do it now, I do it now, do it now. Whenever you have this tendency to procrastinate, program your subconscious mind with this automatic conditioned command, do it now, do it now, do it now. The key to overcoming procrastination is to develop a sense of urgency. Be the kind of person who gets things done quickly. Be the kind of person who launches fast on a task. One of the ways to launch fast on a task is to take the task and break it up, what is called salami slicing it. Slice a piece of salami. You don't try to eat a whole loaf of salami, you just eat it one slice at a time. Take your task and break it up into small pieces and do one piece at a time. Say over and over to yourself, do it now, do it now, do it now. Do you know that less than 2% of the population have a sense of urgency? And that there is not an example of a successful person anywhere who does not have a sense of urgency? That if you just develop a sense of urgency, when somebody gives you a task, that you get on it and do it fast, that alone will move you into the top ranks in a very short period of time. In a study done amongst 104 chief executive officers 2 years ago, they asked what would be the qualities that would put a person on the fast track in their career. You know the conclusion they came back to with? 2 qualities. Number 1, the ability to set priorities, to choose what was relevant over what was irrelevant. And number 2 was the ability to get the job done fast. If all you did was this, set priorities and get the job done fast, that alone would cause you to stand out from 80 to 90% of the people that you work with. Number 9, delegate. Delegate everything that you possibly can. Now, what does delegation mean? Delegation is very simple. What it means is this, is that whatever your hourly rate is, let us say your goal is to earn $50,000 a year. If you work 8 hours a day, that's $25 an hour. You got that? So you're a $25 an hour person. Now, the only way you can make $25 an hour is if you do $25 or more work. And the only way you can do $25 an hour or more work is if you take anything that can be done by anybody who earns less than you per hour, 20, 15, 10, 5, and so on, and delegate, outsource, have somebody else do it. The most valuable resource in the world today is productive time. And do not waste your productive time dropping off laundry, getting your car washed, mowing your lawn, cleaning your house. Do not waste your productive time doing things that you can hire people to do for $5 or $10 an hour. Use your productive time on tasks that are more expensive, of higher value. Delegate everything that you possibly can. In fact, its general conclusion is this, is that if you cannot delegate, if you cannot get other people to do things of lower priority for you, you cannot grow, you cannot develop, you cannot be successful. You may be successful running a shoe shine stand, but that's about the limit of it. Delegation requires one key word, clarity. Clarity. The reason people don't delegate is because they've delegated and other people have dropped the ball. But the major reason why people don't fulfill the tasks that you've given to them is because of lack of clarity. So when you delegate, here are the keys. First of all, think through what you want done. Write it down. Second of all, pick the right person to do it. Don't give a major task to an incapable person. Third of all, make it crystal clear what you want done and when you want it done. And fourth of all, check, review, inspect, keep on top of it to make sure it is done on time. Never assume that anything will be done on time. I read something years ago, a great sign. It said that assumption lies at the root of all foul-ups. Never assume that anybody or anything will be done on time unless you check on it yourself. Okay, the next principle, number 10, is meetings. Meetings are an absolutely essential part of human life. We spend 75% of our time outside of our home and inside our home communicating with other people. It's absolutely essential that we meet. Meetings are very, very productive uses of time, but 50 to 70% of meeting time is wasted. I read a statistic recently that says that the average person spends 3 to 5 years of their life in meetings. The average business person spends 25% of their day in meetings and is wasting more than half of that time. So here are some of the keys to using meetings as an effective business tool. Number 1 is have a purpose for a meeting. Make sure that it's crystal clear at the beginning what the purpose of the meeting is. If you are the person organizing the meeting, when you start the meeting, you say the purpose of this meeting is. And if you are not, when you sit down, you ask the person who is chairing the meeting, what is the purpose of this meeting? You look upon a meeting as an investment. Take the time, the dollar value of the time of each of the people at the table, and look upon it as an investment of that many dollars in time. Best way to save time in meetings is what? Is don't go at all. If you can possibly avoid a meeting, don't go to it. If there's no need for you to be there, get the report on what happened later. Second thing we do when you do go to meetings is make sure that there's an agenda. An agenda is like a list. It's a track to run on. If the chairperson doesn't have a list, offer to put together a list or an agenda for them. Even if you just write it out and photocopy it, it's better than no list at all. Deal with the most important items first. When you have finished your contribution, ask if you can be excused, and start and stop the meeting on time. Now, what's the biggest time waster in meetings? In my estimation, it's 2 things. The meeting goes off track and the conversation becomes irrelevant. Or second of all, people wait until the latecomer shows up. So here's the basic rule with meetings, is always assume that the latecomer is not coming at all and start the meetings punctually. Start and stop the meetings at the specified time. Say the meeting will start at 8, end at 9, and at 9 o'clock, wrap up the meeting. Fair? Okay, that's how you handle meetings, and there's a lot more to it than that, but your skill, your ability to work well in meetings is a critical part of good time management. Number 11 is interruptions. The biggest single time wasters in the world of work within the office are interruptions. And the two major types of interruptions are telephone and walk-in visitors, people that just drop in to socialize and to talk to you. So how do you deal with these interruptions? Let's talk about the telephone first. The way that you deal with telephone interruptions is to remember this. When you were a child, the telephone was where you got phone calls from your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Today, we still are conditioned to have an irresistible urge to answer the phone. As a matter of fact, it's been demonstrated that you can get through to people on the phone that you could never get to physically, because people cannot resist answering a ringing phone. You have to discipline yourself to remember that if it's important enough, they'll phone back. So here's some of the things you do with telephone calls. First of all, have your calls held. Tell somebody you're going to be in a meeting, you're going to be working, and have all your calls held for 2 or 3 hours, and then phone back all at once. Second of all, with regard to interruptions, if you don't have somebody to hold your calls, do what I do when I work at home. I unplug the telephone. Now people say, well, what if it's important? If it's important, they'll call you back. Another thing that you can do if you can't stand unplugging the telephone is put on an answering machine and have the calls captured with an answering machine and then call them back at your own leisure. But don't be a slave to the telephone. The next principle with regard to interruptions is people. Most people are time wasters. That's the basic rule. Most people are time wasters. They waste your time, they waste their own time, they waste other people's time, and you have to be alert to it. So when a person comes in and they want to talk, they drop in without notice. The very fastest way to get rid of a person is to stand up when they walk in. If you stand up and stay standing up, they won't sit down. And you can lead them out by saying, there's one more thing before you go. And then just say it and lead them to the door. If necessary, and I've had to do this on occasion, a talkative person comes into my office, I get up and I start toward the door and I say, I was just leaving, and I leave, and the person follows me out and goes on somewhere to bother somebody else, and then I go back into my office. If people call and say, have you got a minute? Say, no, not right now, could it wait till this afternoon? You know what they'll say? They'll say, sure. And 90% of cases, they'll forget why they came in the first place. So control interruptions. The interruptions and the ringing telephone are two major sources of stress in the world of work. Now, another key management principle, and in management, in time management, in personal management, this is essential. It's what is called key result areas. In other words, it is the key results that you have been hired to accomplish for your business. Even if you own your own business, you are still subject to key result areas. And the way that you find out your key result areas is you ask yourself this question over and over again. Why am I on the payroll? Why are you on the payroll? What have you been hired to accomplish? Not do, not your tasks and activities, but what results are expected of you? You ask yourself this question. The accomplishment of what results is going to lead to my promotion? How am I going to earn more money? What results do I have to achieve in order to get a raise in salary? What results does my company expect of me? What contribution am I expected to make? And then you say, what are my key results? Another way of looking at it is to remember that every job has a series of functions. And there are secondary functions and primary functions, and they're what is called core functions. So you have to ask, what are the core functions of your job? What are the goals of your job? Now, many people say to me, well, I'm not sure. Do you know what the major reason for stress in the American workplace is today? Is people don't know what's expected. I would say 80 or 90% of people out there do not know what's expected. They're not sure why they're on the payroll. And here's a very simple technique for it. Go to your boss with a list of everything that you do and ask your boss to organize it in order of priority. Say what's number 1, what's number 2, what's number 3, what's A, B, or C. Help him or her organize your list in order of priority and give it back to you. I promise you, you'll be surprised. But why is it that you absolutely have to know why you're on the payroll? It's simply this, is that you cannot perform excellently, you cannot do superior work, you cannot be promoted, you cannot get a raise unless you are doing and doing well the key things that your boss has hired you to do. Have you got me on that? Or have I got you on that? Key result areas are critical, and you have to know every single day. In fact, you know something? One of the major sources of frustration in work is to be working very hard on something and being vaguely uneasy because you know it's probably not important. So keep clear channels of communication with your boss, and if you supervise other people, have them bring to you a list of everything that they do, and you organize it in order of priority and make it clear to every person what their contribution is expected to be.